The planet's surface lay in ruin, an expanse of charred earth and twisted metal. Once, this city had thrived, filled with life and laughter, but now, only silence remained, save for the occasional crack of shifting debris. The sky, once clear and blue, was now a murky haze of ash and smoke, a constant reminder of the devastation that had befallen the alien civilization. Craters dotted the landscape, remnants of the fierce battle that had ripped through this world, leaving it desolate and broken. The air hung heavy with the scent of scorched earth and the bitter tang of destruction, a testament to the war that had nearly obliterated everything. Beneath a collapsed structure, Zara lay motionless, her once vibrant skin now dull and covered in dust. Her breath was shallow, each inhalation a struggle as she fought to maintain consciousness. Beside her, Keel, her child, whimpered softly, his small body trembling from hunger and exhaustion. Zara reached out weakly, her hand brushing against Keel's cheek, a gesture of comfort in their shared suffering. She could feel her strength waning, the edges of her vision darkening as the weight of their situation pressed down on her. Her thoughts drifted back to a time before the war, when their city was alive with activity. She remembered the laughter of children, the bustling markets, and the warmth of the sun on her skin. Keel had been so full of energy then, his curiosity boundless as he explored the world around him. But that world was gone now, reduced to rubble and ashes in a matter of days. The memories were bittersweet, a painful reminder of what they had lost, but also a source of strength, fueling her determination to survive. Zara winced as a sharp pain shot through her leg, the injury she had sustained during the attack throbbing incessantly. She knew they were running out of time. Without food or medical attention, they wouldn't last much longer. Keel's small voice broke through her thoughts, a weak, frightened whisper that tugged at her heart. She turned to him, forcing a reassuring smile despite the despair gnawing at her insides. "We will get through this, Keel," she whispered, though the words felt hollow even to her. Still, she clung to the hope that somehow, they would find a way out of this nightmare. The bond between them was all that kept her going. She could feel Keel's fear, his desperation, and it mirrored her own. Yet, there was no room for doubt, no space for giving up. Zara closed her eyes, summoning every ounce of strength she had left, determined to protect her child from the horrors that surrounded them. She refused to let this be the end, not while there was still breath in her body. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the silence, breaking the oppressive stillness that had enveloped the ruins. Zara tensed, her heart racing as fear gripped her. But as the figures came into view, she realized they were unlike anything she had seen before. Clad in armor and moving with purpose, the human Marines advanced cautiously, their weapons ready but their expressions grim. Sergeant Marcus Cole led the way, his gaze scanning the devastation with a mix of sorrow and determination. The destruction was far worse than they had anticipated, the scale of the tragedy overwhelming even for seasoned soldiers. As they moved through the rubble, they remained vigilant, knowing that danger could still be lurking amidst the ruins. But when they spotted the faint movement beneath the debris, all thoughts of their mission momentarily vanished. There, trapped and barely clinging to life, were Zara and Keel, an alien mother and child, desperately in need of help. Cole signaled to his team, and they quickly moved to free the pair from the wreckage. As they worked, Cole's mind raced with the implications of what they had found. Their mission had been to ensure peace, to assist where needed, but now they faced a choice that could change everything. The sight of Zara and Keel, so vulnerable and in need, stirred something within him, a sense of responsibility that went beyond the call of duty. In that moment, he knew they had to save them, no matter the cost. The Marines had been sent to this planet with a clear mission: assess the situation, determine the extent of the damage, and evacuate any survivors. As they moved through the desolate landscape, the devastation they encountered was beyond anything they had imagined. The city was a graveyard of shattered buildings and charred remains, a silent witness to the brutality of the conflict. Each step they took was heavy with the weight of the destruction that surrounded them. For seasoned soldiers, the scene was a grim reminder of the horrors of war, but even they felt the emotional toll of seeing an entire civilization brought to its knees. The team's mood was somber as they pushed forward, their usual banter silenced by the overwhelming sense of loss that hung in the air. Each of them grappled with the conflicting emotions that came with their mission. They were here to help, yet the sheer scale of the tragedy made them question what difference they could truly make. Sergeant Marcus Cole led his team with a steady hand, though the burden of command felt heavier with each passing moment. His orders were to carry out the mission, but his heart ached for the lives lost and those who might still be suffering. It was during their exploration of the ruins that they stumbled upon something they hadn't expected. The faint sound of movement caught their attention, and they quickly zeroed in on the source. Beneath a pile of debris, they found them, an alien mother and child, barely alive. The sight of Zara and Keel, so fragile and on the brink of death, sent a shockwave through the team. For a moment, they stood frozen, not by fear, but by the sheer tragedy of what they were witnessing. The decision to rescue them was immediate, an unspoken agreement among the Marines that transcended their orders. With practiced efficiency, they began the rescue operation. The debris was carefully removed piece by piece, each movement calculated to avoid further injury to the trapped aliens. The Marines' expertise shone through in their actions, every gesture filled with a quiet compassion. They knew the risks, the dangers of working in such unstable conditions, but their focus never wavered. As they lifted Zara and Keel from the wreckage, the relief was palpable, though it was tinged with the grim understanding of the challenges that lay ahead. The first moments of contact were tense, a mixture of fear and uncertainty hanging in the air. Zara, weakened and disoriented, looked at the humans with a mixture of caution and desperation. The Marines, aware of the delicate nature of the situation, approached her with care. Communication was nearly impossible at first. Their languages were foreign to each other, and the situation only heightened the difficulty. But actions spoke louder than words. The Marines offered water, tended to Zara's wounds, and did their best to comfort Keel, whose eyes were wide with fear. Slowly, the barriers between them began to dissolve. Zara's initial fear gave way to a cautious trust as she realized the humans meant no harm. The Marines treated her injuries with a gentleness that belied their hardened exterior, and their efforts to soothe Keel were met with quiet appreciation. As they worked, the Marines shared glances of understanding, knowing that in this moment, they were doing something that transcended their mission. They were saving lives, not just because it was their duty, but because it was the right thing to do. But as they tended to the mother and child, a discovery was made that shook them to their core. Keel, though innocent in appearance, held within him the key to a weapon of unimaginable power. The realization was like a punch to the gut. This child, who had been so close to death, carried within him the potential to end the war. But the cost of using such a weapon was unthinkable. Countless lives would be lost, entire worlds could be destroyed. Sergeant Cole felt the weight of this knowledge settle heavily on his shoulders. The conflict within him was immediate and intense. On one hand, the weapon could bring about a swift end to the war, potentially saving millions. On the other, it would mean sacrificing the life of an innocent child and possibly dooming countless others. The decision was not one he could take lightly, and as he looked at Keel, he couldn't help but see his own children in the boy's eyes. The question gnawed at him: was it right to use a child as a means to an end, no matter how noble the cause? The team waited, their eyes on Cole as he wrestled with the moral dilemma before him. The choice would define them all, and the weight of it pressed down on them like the very rubble they had just cleared. There was no easy answer, no clear path forward. All they knew was that the decision they made here, in this desolate place, would echo across the galaxy, for better or worse. The Marines gathered in a tight circle, their faces etched with concern as they debated the gravity of their discovery. The room was thick with tension, each soldier wrestling with the implications of what they had learned. Voices were low, but the intensity of the discussion was palpable. Some argued that they had a responsibility to use the weapon Keel possessed, to end the war and save countless lives. They spoke of the greater good, of the millions who could be spared from suffering if the weapon were unleashed. But others, with equal conviction, pushed back. How could they justify sacrificing an innocent child, using him as a mere tool of destruction? The morality of their mission was at stake, and the lines between right and wrong had never seemed more blurred. Sergeant Cole listened to his team, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. His mind was a battlefield of its own, memories of past wars flashing before him. He had seen the horrors that came from choosing expediency over morality, the lives shattered by decisions made in the heat of battle. And now, here he was, faced with a choice that could define not only his career but his very soul. Could he really order the use of a weapon housed within a child, knowing the devastation it would cause? Or was there a way to protect both the innocent and the many? The questions gnawed at him, demanding answers he wasn't sure he had. As the debate raged on among the Marines, Zara sat quietly, her heart pounding in her chest as she pieced together the fragments of what she had overheard. The realization of what Keel carried within him hit her like a physical blow. The weapon, something she had only heard whispers of, was not just a legend. It was real, and it was inside her son. Fear gripped her, cold and unyielding, as she imagined what the humans might do if they decided to harness Keel's power. Would they take him away from her? Use him as a tool of war? The very thought made her blood run cold. Memories flooded back, of the elders in her community speaking of a weapon so powerful that it could end all conflict. It had been created in secret, intended as a last resort if their civilization was ever on the brink of annihilation. But no one had ever expected it to be used. It was a burden too great for any one being to bear, especially not a child. Zara's heart ached with the knowledge that her innocent Keel was at the center of this terrifying power. She looked at him now, his small form resting beside her, unaware of the storm that swirled around him. How could she protect him from a destiny he had no say in? Despite her fear, Zara began to see something in the humans she hadn't expected. They were not the heartless warriors she had feared. They treated her and Keel with kindness, with a respect that transcended their differences. She watched as they tended to her wounds, as they offered Keel food and comfort. Their actions spoke of a shared humanity, a connection that went beyond species or origin. Slowly, Zara's initial mistrust began to fade. She saw the way Sergeant Cole looked at Keel, not as a weapon, but as a child in need of protection. It was a look she recognized, one that mirrored her own feelings as a mother. Cole, in turn, found himself drawn to the child in a way he hadn't expected. Keel was more than just the key to a powerful weapon. He was a frightened boy, innocent in all of this. As Cole watched him, he couldn't help but see his own children in Keel's eyes, the same vulnerability, the same need for safety. The bond that formed between them was subtle but undeniable, a connection that made the decision Cole faced even more agonizing. He knew he had to protect Keel, not just as a soldier, but as a human being. The sense of urgency grew with each passing moment. Reports came in of enemy forces converging on their location, drawn by the same information that had led the Marines to Zara and Keel. Time was running out, and Cole knew they couldn't stay in the ruins much longer. The pressure to make a decision was immense, the weight of it pressing down on him like a physical force. The lives of millions hung in the balance, but so did the life of one innocent child. In the end, Cole knew the choice he made would define him and the future of those around him. Sergeant Cole stood before his team, the weight of his decision heavy in the air. His voice was steady as he spoke, but the gravity of his words was unmistakable. He had made his choice. Keel's innocence would be protected at all costs. They would not use the child as a weapon, no matter the potential to end the war. It was a decision rooted in humanity, in the belief that some lines should never be crossed, even in the darkest of times. The team listened in silence, each member processing the magnitude of what this meant. There was no dissent, no questioning of the order. They knew the risks, the potential consequences, but they also knew they couldn't live with themselves if they sacrificed a child for the sake of victory. The decision was unanimous, a collective resolve to stand by Cole, even if it meant abandoning their mission. They prepared for what they knew would be a difficult and dangerous escape, the reality of the situation settling in. The emotional toll was visible on their faces, each soldier grappling with the fear, the uncertainty, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility. But there was also a quiet determination, a shared understanding that they were doing what was right, no matter the cost. With the decision made, the Marines moved quickly to evacuate Zara and Keel. The path ahead was fraught with danger, as enemy forces had already begun to close in on their position. Every step was a calculated risk, every decision a matter of life and death. The tension was palpable as they navigated through the ruins, the weight of their mission now replaced by the singular goal of protecting the mother and child. As they moved, the sounds of distant gunfire and explosions drew closer, a constant reminder of the peril they faced. Just as they neared the extraction point, the enemy struck with a ferocity they hadn't anticipated. A sudden barrage of firepower pinned them down, and it became clear that the enemy was determined to capture Keel at all costs. The Marines quickly shifted into a defensive formation, their training taking over as they fought to protect their charges. The battle was intense, the air thick with smoke and the sounds of conflict. Every Marine knew what was at stake, and they fought with everything they had, refusing to let the enemy get close to Zara and Keel. In the midst of the chaos, Sergeant Cole realized that the only way to ensure Zara and Keel's safety was to make the ultimate sacrifice. The enemy's numbers were overwhelming, and there was no way they could all escape together. Cole made the decision without hesitation, a calm resolve settling over him as he ordered his team to continue the evacuation without him. He would stay behind, holding off the enemy long enough for the others to reach safety. The team protested, their loyalty to Cole making it difficult to leave him behind. But they knew there was no other option. With heavy hearts, they followed his orders, retreating with Zara and Keel as Cole and a few volunteers made a final stand. The battle that followed was fierce and desperate, the Marines using every last resource to hold the line. Cole fought with the determination of a man who knew this was the end, every action driven by the need to protect the innocent lives entrusted to him. As the extraction ship lifted off, taking Zara and Keel to safety, Cole faced the enemy with unyielding resolve. The enemy forces surged forward, but Cole stood his ground, buying the time needed for the escape. His final act of heroism was one of selflessness, a sacrifice made in the name of protecting a future that would never be his. As the enemy finally overran his position, Cole's last thoughts were of the child he had sworn to protect, and the hope that his sacrifice had made a difference. Zara and Keel finally reached the safety of a hidden sanctuary far from the battlefield. The ship touched down gently, the hum of its engines fading into silence as they disembarked. The air here was different, clean, untainted by the stench of war. But the peace of this place did little to ease the ache in Zara's heart. As she looked at her son, now sleeping soundly for the first time in days, her thoughts returned to the Marines who had saved them. Their faces, their voices, the determination in their eyes, they were all etched into her memory. They had given everything for her and Keel, their lives spent so that she and her child might have a chance to live. The weight of their sacrifice pressed heavily on her, a reminder that freedom always comes at a cost. The loss of Sergeant Cole and his team was a wound that would take time to heal. Zara knew that their decision to protect Keel, to place his innocence above all else, was not made lightly. They had chosen peace, even when destruction might have seemed the easier path. And for that, they would be remembered as heroes, not for their might in battle, but for their unwavering commitment to what was right. The galaxy would know their names, not as warriors, but as defenders of life. Zara mourned them deeply, but she also felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. Their courage had given her and Keel a future, one that she would honor in every way she could. Keel's potential as a weapon was now a closely guarded secret, known only to a few trusted individuals. The Marines had ensured that the knowledge of what he carried would never fall into the wrong hands. The genetic code that held such devastating power would remain dormant, a legacy of restraint rather than destruction. It was a decision that spoke to a deeper hope, a belief that the galaxy could move beyond the endless cycles of violence that had plagued it for so long. By choosing to protect Keel rather than exploit him, the Marines had set a precedent, a message to others that peace was not just an ideal, but a choice that could be made even in the darkest of times. Zara understood the significance of this legacy. The weapon would never be used, and in that decision lay the seeds of a new future. It was a future where her people could rise from the ashes of their destroyed world, not as conquerors, but as survivors who had chosen to live in peace. Inspired by the Marine's sacrifice, Zara resolved to become a voice for change among her people. She would advocate for peace, for understanding, for the kind of compassion that the humans had shown her and Keel. Her species had been brought to the brink of extinction, but now, with the war behind them, they had a chance to rebuild, not just their cities, but their very way of life. The first steps toward an alliance between her people and the humans were tentative but hopeful. There was much to learn from each other, and the bond formed in the heat of battle would be the foundation of something greater. Mutual respect and understanding would guide their interactions, and together they could work to ensure that such a war would never happen again. Zara knew it would take time, but she believed in the possibility of a future where different species could coexist, not just in peace, but in genuine friendship. It was the best way she could think of to honor the Marines who had given their lives for her and Keel. Reflecting on all that had happened, Zara felt a deep sense of purpose. The story of Sergeant Cole and his team was one she would tell for generations, a reminder of the power of choices made in the face of overwhelming odds. Their decision to protect Keel, to preserve his innocence, had shown that even in the midst of destruction, there could be hope. It was a lesson that Zara hoped would resonate with future generations, a lesson in the importance of choosing peace, of valuing life, and of understanding that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to protect. The sacrifices made would not be in vain. They had paved the way for a new era, one where the hope of peace could finally take root and grow.